been 11 days since South Africa's seismic 2024 elections. And a lot of people are wondering what's happening in South Africa. Well, here's a quick primer on where we sit today. 11 days after the May 29th, 2024 elections, there is no agreement yet for a government of any sort going forward. Now, why does that matter? In South Africa's elections, the African National Congress, the party that claims the mantle of liberation, yet was just one of many players, the African National Congress, which has been in power in an unassailable position since 1994, finally has lost the majority, dropping to just 40.2% of the vote, and quite a precipitous drop from its previous election in 2019, where the party received 57% of the vote, minus 17%. For their part, the opposition hasn't done much better. The Democratic Alliance managed to hold on to many of their voters, but finished with about 120,000 fewer voters and coming in at just under 22% of the electorate. So that accounts for 62%. The rest of the electorate is very much divided amongst a host of parties, including the new upstart Mkhonto we Sizwe party, which is the spear of the nation, named after the so-called Liberation Army of the ANC, founded, of course, by Nelson Mandela back in the early 1960s. Now, this party has nothing to do with that, although many of them, or members of it, claim to be veterans of the struggle. That party is led by Jacob Zuma, who claims to still be a member of the ruling African National Congress, the former president, the convicted felon who has managed to skirt and escape his jail sentence by claiming and feigning ill health, but seems to be quite healthy on the campaign trail during this election. Now, they're about 14.8%, which shocked a lot of analysts, but not all of us. This is a cult of personality, and one driven by a very clever and crafty politician, Jacob Zuma. Beyond that is the economic freedom fighters, the erstwhile members of the African National Congress who left the party with Julius Malema because they were unhappy with Jacob Zuma back in the day. Now, that party reached its zenith at less than 11% in 2019 and has fallen back to 9.5% this time, losing 500,000 voters and losing a lot of credibility. Beyond that, next comes the Inkatha Freedom Party, once known as Inkatha, the movement led by Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who passed away this past year, now led by Velenkosini Hlabisa, potentially a good candidate for president for South Africa. But that party is the only major party that gained voters. Now, despite the presence of the MK party, which is heavily focused on Zulu ethno-nationalism, not exclusively, but heavily, a lot of those Zulu voters went for Jacob Zuma's MK party. Many of them, if not most, likely may have voted for IFP, giving them a much stronger showing. Nonetheless, they are the only party that increased its vote in the election, major party that is, and they come in with 4%. And then just behind them, the last party I'll mention of note here is the Patriotic Alliance led by Gate McKenzie, a convicted felon and bank robber or something like that, back about 20 years ago, who has become a businessman and started a political party known as Patriotic Alliance several years back, a party that received just 6,600 votes in the last election, but a laser-like focus on attracting votes from the colored community of South Africa paid off handsomely as he achieved over 300,000 votes and 2%, making that party a potential kingmaker in any coalition. Now, since the election, the African National Congress is shown that it's quite fragmented. We've known this, but it's quite obvious that they cannot make a decision. The smart money, the obvious money, is to make a coalition between the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance, potentially also with the Inkatha Freedom Party. That would be the most reasonable outcome for what is an otherwise dismal outcome in this election for all political parties. And for governance for South Africa, it could work. It would probably be the best option. However, several political parties and political figures and leaders have exposed their blatant, naked, racist, race-hustling behavior, which is quite shocking as the legacy media in South Africa looks the other way, as the world looks the other way, and no one's paying attention to the horrific things being said and the distortion of history. We have politicians within the ANC, Lindiwe Sisulu, the daughter of Albertina Sisulu, who has disgraced her parents' legacy with naked, obvious race baiting and race hustling, and calling the Democratic Alliance opposition party, who she worked with in Congress for the past 30 years, racist, and saying that they are the offspring of the National Party and that they are responsible for apartheid. This is the biggest lie since, 81 million. So that's quite obviously a fantasy. But she's not alone in this behavior. The South African Communist Party, most people don't pay much attention to them, but they're running around with the same race hustling narrative. And of course, the trade unions, COSATU, the Congress of South African Trade Unions of South Africa, COSATU, which is part of the tripartite alliance between the Communist Party, the ANC, and COSATU, the Alliance of Evil, if you will. Casato's also saying the same sort of rhetoric, and also hearing utterances of this from the MK party of Jacob Zuma. From the EFF, the same sort of thing. And all of these black leaders in South Africa acting irresponsibly and dividing people. Folks, if you go around South Africa, by and large, most South Africans, by a wide margin, the vast majority, virtually all South Africans, are good people, get along. But these politicians continually try to divide people by race, and it's disgusting and vile. And it's spread all over the world. This contagion finds itself in America now, courtesy of Barack Hussein Obama, and continuing under Biden now. It's a shame. It's a disgrace. People who are honest, good, hardworking people are painted as racist by the small-minded political creatures who seek craven political power. Instead of seeking craven political power, parties should work together. The problem with working with the MK and with EFF is that the ANC ostensibly is a party that's based on the rule of law, a party that believes in the system that is in place, although there are many problems with the current system, mostly created by efforts to appease a vocal but significant minority of leftists who want nationalization and expropriation, and they want to get even. And that's a problem. Now, for the ANC, that's a problem, aligning with these players. Not to mention, both the EFF and MK are really just what used to be the ANC, and there's a lot of animosity there from that. And inside the ANC, there are many sympathetic people who are really clandestinely part of the MK movement and sympathetic with it. So both of those alliances create a problem for the ANC. The Inkatha Freedom Party is a party the ANC murdered 20,000 of their followers in the late 80s and early 1990s in KwaZulu-Natal province, and there's lingering animosities there. But that's mostly forgotten, believe it or not. Strangely, it's forgotten. So there could be a link there. But the Democratic Alliance official opposition has been that way for some time. They are in an awkward position too, because calling for the rule of law, you shouldn't have to call for that, that should be obvious, but that's one of their stated goals. Bottom line here, folks, is nothing's pretty. It's 11 days after the election. On the 22nd of June, the president is supposed to be inaugurated. We don't know who that is. There's been no vote. We have to wait for that, for Parliament to convene. The new members of Parliament will be sworn in on the 17th in Cape Town. On the 22nd, the inauguration is supposed to take place. So we have a lot of work to do between now and then in South Africa. But it's time for adults to step forward in civil society, in political parties in South Africa, and be men and women of good character and moral fortitude. Call out the race hustling, call out the race baiters, call out these whiny liars, and expose them for the frauds that they are. South Africans are tired of this nonsensical racial narrative. It's time to end it and move on and work together. A government of national unity, one option, probably not the best, because that brings all the parties in and everybody wants a piece of the pie and they want their little cut of the vig. It's not going to work. The better option is a coalition between the ANC, the DA, and the IFP. Not particularly palatable for many South Africans, including ANC voters, DA voters, or for me for that matter, but it may be the best option to rescue South Africa going forward. Whatever the consequences of the election, one thing has changed. The dominance of the ANC is destroyed and likely forever, and they have no one to blame but themselves for their naked theft, their opaque conduct, their disregard for the rule of law, and their patronizing manner in addressing voters and citizens of South Africa. People had enough. As Afrikaans-speaking South Africans say, ek is gatvol. And so are many of the 63 million South Africans. People say that we voted for the ANC, so you shouldn't be going in coalition with the DA. Well, the problem with that story is you didn't vote for the ANC. The ANC received 6.4 million votes, down from 10.4 million, and that's in a turnout of just 58%. Just 58% of the 27 million registered voters, which is a fraction of the over 40 million eligible voters, which is a fraction of the 63 million South Africans. That means that about 1 in 10 South African nationals voted for the ANC. That's not a mandate. That's not we voted for the ANC. Virtually nobody voted for the ANC, or for that matter, any other parties. And from Pretoria, just outside Loftus Versfeld Stadium, right next to me here, where the Bulls won yesterday 30-23 over Bennington in a spirited contest, this is Chris, reporting for Chris Wyatt Reports. Thank you very much. God bless. Have a good day, and treat each other well.